Welcome to our deep dive into GCSE Business Studies math skills. So, imagine you're in the exam room and you can tackle all those tricky questions, really impress everyone with, how much you know about business.
That's the goal?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to be covering like all sorts of essential concepts. We'll look at percentage changes, calculate profit, and even, those mysterious cash flow forecasts.
Oh, and don't forget about average rates of return. Those are always fun.
Right, exactly. We even have this interesting scenario where a business owner has to figure out how many training sessions they need to run to hit a specific profit goal. So it's really putting these skills into practice.
It's all about getting you ready for your exams, making sure you understand these core math skills.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's talk about percentages. Our source material really stresses how important it is to understand percentage changes in business, in real-world situations. So, for example, let's say a company's revenue goes up, jumps from like 130,000 pounds to 156,000 pounds.
Yeah, that's a big jump. But we need to know exactly how much it's grown, right?
Yeah. How significant is that growth, really?
Right, and that's where the percentage increase formula comes in. It gives us a way to quantify that growth and compare it to other periods or even other businesses. So to calculate it, you find the difference between those two values, the new and the old. You divide it by that original value and then times it by 100 to get the percentage.
So in this case, the increase is what, a solid 20%?
Yep. Exactly 20%. So that's definitely something to celebrate.
It is. It is. And I see here that the source material mentions a kind of shortcut for calculating these changes, something called decimal multipliers.
Oh, yeah. Decimal multipliers. Those are really handy. They let you represent a percentage increase or even a decrease directly.
Okay, so how does that work?
So say you want to increase something by 20%, right? You multiply it by 1.20. That's the original 100% plus that extra 20% all in one go.
Oh, I see. And decreases work the same way.
Yeah, totally. To decrease by 20%, you just multiply by 0.80, which is like saying 100% minus that 20%.
So it's like a secret code for percentages. I like it. Okay, let's move on to something that's, at the heart of any business, really. Revenue, costs, and profit. It's like, think of it like baking pastries. You got your product, the delicious pastries, then the cost of all your ingredients, and then hopefully, a sweet profit at the end.
I love that analogy. It's perfect.
Right. So let's break it down. Let's say you sell, 450 pastries at £3 each.
Okay, so to get your total revenue, you just multiply the selling price by how many you sold.
So 450 pastries times £3 each. That gives us a total revenue of £3,350. Not bad.
Not bad at all.
But of course, to really understand how well this bakery is doing, we need to look at costs too, right?
Exactly. And our source material does a really good job explaining that total cost. It breaks it down into two main categories: fixed costs and variable costs.
Right, fixed costs and variable costs. Now, I always get those mixed up.
It's easy to do. Fixed costs are like your rent or insurance. They stay the same no matter how many pastries you bake.
Okay, makes sense.
But variable costs, those change depending on how many pastries you're making, like your ingredients. The more pastries, the more ingredients you need.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the source material gives an example here of a business. They have fixed costs of £6,000. They're producing 1,800 units at £4 per unit. How would we figure out the total cost there?
So you would just add those fixed costs to the total variable cost.
Okay, so that's £6,000 plus. What's the variable cost?
Well, the variable cost would be those 1,800 units times the £4 per unit, so that's 7,200 pounds.
Okay, so £6,000 plus 7,200 pounds.
Gives us a total cost of 13,200 pounds.
Right, so now for the exciting part, profit. This is where we see if our little bakery is really raking it in. It's just total revenue minus total cost, right?
Exactly. And that's a figure every business owner wants to see in the black, not in the red.
Absolutely. But what if, instead of just calculating the profit, a business owner has a specific profit goal in mind? Like that personal trainer we mentioned, they want to hit a certain profit target each month. How does that change things?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. You see, by understanding how these things are all connected, revenue, cost, profit businesses can work backward from their goal. They can figure out exactly how much they need to sell to hit that target. It's like solving a puzzle, and these formulas are the key.
So it's not just about crunching numbers, it's about using them to make smart decisions.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to another crucial aspect of running a business. We've talked about profit, but now let's talk about cash flow. This is all about keeping track of the money coming in and the money going out, kind of like managing your own personal finances, right?
Exactly. Cash flow is all about timing. You might be making a profit on paper, but if the money isn't coming in at the right time to cover your expenses, you could be in trouble.
That makes sense. So how do we keep track of that?
Well, that's where cash flow forecasting comes in. It helps you predict those inflows and outflows and stay on top of your finances.
Right. And our source material does a good job of breaking down the net cash flow formula. It's basically just the total inflows minus the total outflows.
Right. Yeah, just like calculating your net income after all your expenses are paid. And then you have the closing balance formula, which helps you track your cash position from one period to the next.
So that closing balance becomes the opening balance for the next period.
Exactly. And the formula for that is closing balance equals the opening balance plus your net cash flow.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. Let's try an example from the source material. Let's say a business has an opening balance of 6,000 pounds. They have inflows of 9,500 pounds and outflows of 11,200 pounds. How do we calculate the closing balance?
Okay, first we find the net cash flow. So that'll be 9,500, the inflows, minus 11,200 pounds, the outflows, which gives us a negative net cash flow of 1,700 pounds. That means more money went out than came in.
Right, so their closing balance would be 6,000 pounds plus that negative 1,700 pounds. That leaves them with a closing balance of, let's see, 4,300 pounds. So even though they had more coming in, they end up with less because of those higher outflows.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for businesses to really keep an eye on their cash flow. By predicting those inflows and outflows, they can anticipate any potential problems and, make adjustments. Think of it like a financial roadmap for your business.
Okay, a financial roadmap. I like that. Now, speaking of making smart financial decisions, the source material talks about this thing called the average rate of return, ARR, I think they call it. It's all about evaluating potential investments. Sounds a bit intimidating, to be honest.
Oh, it's not as bad as it sounds. ARR essentially tells you the average annual profit you can expect from an investment, expressed as a percentage of your initial cost. It's a way to compare different options and see which one offers the best potential return over time.
Okay, so the source material gives this example. A company invests 100,000 pounds in a new piece of machinery, and they expect a total profit of 50,000 pounds over 5 years. How would we calculate the ARR for that?
So first we need to figure out the average annual profit, which is just the total profit divided by the number of years. So in this case, it would be 50,000 pounds divided by 5.
Okay, that gives us an average annual profit of 10,000 pounds.
Right. And then to get the ARR, we take that 10,000 pounds, divide it by the initial investment of 100,000 pounds, and then multiply by 100 to get the percentage.
Okay, so that gives us an ARR of 10%.
You got it. So on average, this company can expect a 10% return on their investment each year. Not bad, right?
That is pretty impressive. It really shows how useful this ARR can be when businesses are deciding where to put their money.
Absolutely. Now, how about we move on to some key metrics that businesses use to understand their profitability and efficiency? Things like gross profit margin and net profit margin.
Okay, to be honest, I always mix those two up. Is there an easy way to remember the difference?
Well, think of it like this. Gross profit margin focuses on how profitable your main product or service is, while net profit margin looks at the big picture, all the expenses involved in running the whole business.
Okay, so it's like comparing the profit on a single cup of lemonade versus the profit margin for the whole lemonade stand operation, taking into account all those other costs like rent, supplies, advertising, and all that.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we actually calculate those margins?
To calculate your gross profit margin, you divide the gross profit by your total revenue and then multiply by 100. So, for example, our source material shows a company with a gross profit of 90,000 pounds on revenue of 250,000 pounds.
Okay, so we would divide that 90,000 pounds by the 250,000 pounds and then times it by 100. See, that gives us a gross profit margin of 36%. Not bad, right?
That's a pretty healthy margin. For every pound of revenue, they're keeping 36 pence as gross profit. Now, for the net profit margin, we use a similar formula. Divide the net profit by the revenue and then multiply by 100. In this case, our source material gives us a business earning 32,000 pounds in net profit on 280,000 pounds of revenue.
Okay, so we divide 32,000 pounds by 280,000 pounds and multiply by 100. That gives us a net profit margin of, 11.43%.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that, generally speaking, higher margins are a good sign. It usually means a business is running efficiently, controlling their costs, and bringing in solid profits.
Right. It's all starting to come together like pieces of a puzzle. It's not just about memorizing formulas. It's about understanding the whole picture of how a business works, from the revenue to the costs and ultimately to the profit.
You've got it. Each of these metrics plays a role in a business's overall financial health, and they all help inform the decisions that a business makes. Welcome back. Are you ready to put those math skills to the test and see how these formulas can really help you ace those GCSE business studies exams?
Yeah, I'm excited to tackle some real-world problems, see how all these concepts we talked about actually work in practice. I see our source material has some good practice questions lined up for us.
Perfect. Where should we start? How about a question on percentage increase?
Okay, percentage increase. Sounds good.
Okay, so imagine a business decides to raise the price of one of its products. They go from, let's say, 80 pounds to 100 pounds. What's the percentage increase there?
All right, let me see. I remember the formula. It's the difference between the new price and the old price divided by the original price, and then all of that times 100.
Exactly.
So it would be 100 minus 80, which is 20, divided by 80, and then times 100.
That's right. And what does that give us?
A 25% increase. See, these formulas aren't so bad once you get the hang of them.
That's the spirit. Practice makes perfect. Okay, let's try one that combines a few things. Revenue, costs, and profit. Let's say a business sells 500 products at 20 pounds each. Their total costs come out to 6,000 pounds. So what's their total revenue and their profit?
Okay, I remember this one. Total revenue is just the selling price times the quantity sold. So in this case, it'd be 500 times 20 pounds, which is 10,000 pounds in total revenue.
That's right. Good job.
Okay, and then to get the profit, we just subtract the total costs from the total revenue.
Ex-
So that's 10,000 pounds minus 6,000 pounds, which gives us a profit of 4,000 pounds. Wow, that's a pretty decent profit margin.
It is. They're doing well. All right, how about we try a cash flow forecasting problem now?
Okay, cash flow forecasting. Hit me with it.
Okay, imagine a business has an opening balance of 3,000 pounds. They're expecting inflows of 12,000 pounds and outflows of 8,500 pounds for the next month. What will their closing balance be at the end of the month?
All right, time to put on my financial planning hat. So first, we need to calculate the net cash flow, which is inflows minus outflows. So that's 12,000 pounds minus 8,500 pounds,
Right.
which gives us a positive net cash flow of 3,500 pounds. Always a good sign when it's positive. Right?
Absolutely. It means more money is coming in than going out.
Right, exactly. Okay, so now we need to find the closing balance. We just add the net cash flow to the opening balance. So 3,000 pounds plus 3,500 pounds. That gives us a closing balance of 6,500 pounds.
You nailed it. See, you're becoming a cash flow pro. Okay, how about we test your knowledge of average rate of return? Remember ARR.
Okay, yeah, ARR. I think I remember that one.
All right, so a company invests 50,000 pounds in some new machinery. They're expecting a total profit of 25,000 pounds over the next 5 years. What would their ARR be?
Okay, so first we need to figure out the average annual profit. That's just the total profit divided by the number of years. So 25,000 pounds divided by 5 years,
Right.
which gives us an average annual profit of 5,000 pounds.
Perfect.
Now, we take that average annual profit divided by the initial investment and then times it by 100 to get the percentage.
Exactly.
So that's 5,000 pounds divided by 50,000 pounds, which is, and then times 100. So the ARR would be 10%. It's interesting to see how businesses can use this formula to figure out the long-term return on their investments.
It is, isn't it? It's a powerful tool for decision making. Okay, ready for our final challenge?
Yeah, bring it on. What do we got?
How about calculating gross profit margin and net profit margin?
Oh, okay. The two that I always mix up.
Let's see if you got them down now. Let's say a business has sales revenue of 200,000 pounds. Their cost of sales is 80,000 pounds, and their total expenses are 40,000 pounds. Can you calculate both margins?
All right, let me see if I can do this. So first, to find the gross profit, we subtract the cost of sales from the revenue. So that's 200,000 pounds minus 80,000 pounds, which gives us a gross profit of 120,000 pounds.
Okay, good start. What's next?
To get the gross profit margin, we divide the gross profit by the total revenue and then multiply by 100.
You got it.
So 120,000 pounds divided by 200,000 pounds and then times 100. That gives us a gross profit margin of 60%. Wow, that's a pretty impressive margin.
It is. It means they're making a good profit on their products or services before taking into account all those other expenses.
Okay, so now for the net profit margin, we need to look at all the expenses, right?
Right.
So first, we need to calculate the net profit, which is the gross profit minus the total expenses. So 120,000 pounds minus 40,000 pounds. That gives us a net profit of 80,000 pounds.
All right. And then?
Then we divide that net profit by the total revenue and multiply by 100. So 80,000 pounds divided by 200,000 pounds times 100. That gives us a net profit margin of 40%. Even with all those expenses, they're still doing pretty well.
Exactly. You've successfully tackled a whole range of business maths problems now, from percentage increases to profit margins, cash flow forecasting, and those essential profit margins. How are you feeling about all these calculations now?
Honestly, I feel a lot more confident. I think I can actually handle those GCSE Business Studies exam questions. It's all starting to make sense now.
That's fantastic to hear. Remember, it's not just about memorizing the formulas. It's about understanding how to use them, as tools to analyze a business and make informed decisions.
Absolutely. It's like having a whole new set of skills now.
Yeah.
But, are there any specific strategies we can use when we're actually in the exam, facing those questions?
That's a great question. It's not enough to just know the formulas, right? You need to know how to apply them in different situations. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll look at some techniques for really deciphering those exam questions, figuring out the key information, and choosing the right formula to get to the right answer.
That sounds super helpful. I'm ready to learn all those exam cracking strategies. All right, welcome back to our final part of this GCSE Business Studies Math Skills deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, those formulas, practice problems. Now, how about we focus on how to actually use these skills, when you're in the exam, staring down those questions?
You're right. It's one thing to know the formulas, but it's a whole other thing to know how to apply them in the exam, under pressure. Luckily, our source material gives us some really great examples. They actually walk us through the process step by step.
Oh, perfect. Can we look at one of those?
Absolutely. So there's one example here about a personal trainer who wants to reach a certain profit goal each week. They need to figure out how many training sessions to run, but there's a bit of a twist. They also make money by, get this, conducting weddings.
Okay, so it's not just about the training sessions then. We need to factor in the wedding income too. This is getting interesting.
It is. The example tells us they earn a profit of £1,800 per wedding, after expenses, and they do 2 weddings a week.
So their weekly profit from weddings would be £1,800 times 2, which is £3,600. That's pretty good.
Not bad at all for a side hustle. Now let's look at the personal training side of things. The example says they charge £180 per session and have expenses of £60 per session.
So their profit per training session would be £180 minus £60, which comes out to £120 per session.
Exactly. So now the question is, how many sessions do they need to run to reach their overall profit goal?
Okay, the example doesn't actually give us a specific profit target. So for this, let's just say they want to make an extra £2,880 per week from the personal training on top of that wedding income. So to figure out how many sessions, we divide their desired training profit, that £2,880, by their profit per session, which is £120.
Right.
So that comes out to 24 training sessions. So if they want to reach their combined profit goal, the weddings plus the training, they need to do 2 weddings and 24 training sessions each week. Wow, that's a busy week.
It is, but it shows you how, breaking the problem down into smaller steps makes it much more manageable.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about finding that key information, using the right formulas, and then just working through the calculations carefully. Are there any other tips for, tackling these exam questions?
Well, the source material emphasizes this a lot. Really understand what the question is asking, the context. Don't just jump into calculations before you've got a good grasp of what they're asking for. And sometimes they'll throw in extra information that's not even relevant. So being able to pick out those key pieces of information is really important.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get lost in all the details if you're not focused on the right information.
Exactly. And the source material goes on to show us examples involving output, calculating those closing balances, even analyzing how changes in inventory value affect a company's total assets. So practicing with different types of questions is definitely going to help you feel more prepared when you walk into that exam.
It's amazing how all these business concepts are connected, right? We're not just learning random formulas. We're actually getting a whole picture of how businesses actually work, how they make those decisions, how they track their performance. It's like a behind-the-scenes look.
It really is. And remember, practice is key here. The more you work through these examples, the more comfortable you'll get with the formulas and using them in different situations.
It's like training your brain for a maths marathon.
Exactly. And speaking of handy tools, don't forget those decimal multipliers we talked about earlier. Those can really speed up your calculations for percentage increases and decreases.
Oh, yeah, those are super helpful. They're like the little shortcuts, little cheats almost.
Well, not cheats exactly, but they're efficient.
Right. To increase a value, you multiply by 1 plus the percentage as a decimal. And to decrease, you multiply by 1 minus the percentage as a decimal. So much quicker.
It can save you so much time and energy in the exam, and that lets you focus on showing what you know about the actual business concepts.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our GCSE Business Studies Math Skills Deep Dive. I have to say, I'm feeling way more prepared for those exam questions now.
And remember, these skills aren't just for exams. They're valuable tools you can use in your everyday life, managing your personal finances, maybe analyzing a business opportunity, or even if you start your own company one day.
It's been great exploring this world of business through, well, the language of maths. We've seen how those formulas can really help us understand how businesses tick, how they make decisions, how they achieve success. From percentages and profit margins to cash flow and investments, we've learned a lot.
We've tackled those practice problems, demystified those exam questions, and I think we've both built up our confidence in using these business math skills.
It's just the beginning, right? We got to keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive. A huge thanks to Google Notebook LM for the AI assistance and the audio dialogue. Until next time, happy calculating.